Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Many people experience after-death communication and signs from their departed loved ones. For some, these experiences are ongoing and manifest in almost miraculous ways. My guest this week on Vox Novus, Sophia Demas, has had an inordinate amount of these experiences and has embraced understanding them and the crossroads between science and spirituality. Sophia has enjoyed 3 diverse careers, a decade in architecture that included working with notable 20th century visionary Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, running her own couture fashion business, and working as a mental health therapist in private practice. She also created Living a Fearless Life, a 12-workshop program designed to help society's most at-risk women increase their self-esteem, which was piloted in the Philadelphia prison system. She's the author of the Amazon best-selling The Divine Language of Coincidence. Her website is sophiademas.com, and she joins me this week to share her latest book, Consciousness Beyond Death: True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. Please join me in welcoming back Sophia Demas. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Wonderful to have you. For those meeting you for the first time, please share your early life and path and how it shaped your understanding of our world.
Well, I was very fortunate to have a very fostering home, like a lot of love. My mother was a very religious woman, and but she never forced it on me. And things happened when I was 19. Was my first sort of bout with, whoa, there's something bigger than us here. I was going through this, I would say, existential angst, like a lot of 19-year-olds, and there were 2 issues that I felt were unsolvable. And in a very short period of time, because of a dream and meeting a man, those 2 issues were solved very cleanly. And it was such a contrast from thinking this will never be solved that it started to make me pay attention. So I would say that is a real milestone in looking for things to be put in my path.
And in your first book, The Divine Language of Coincidence, you started talking about these events that happened at the time you were 19. You were talking about gentle prods and inner voice. Share some of that with us, please.
So I have a basic philosophy of life that there is a divine intelligence. I use the word God a lot. And this intelligence wants us to be happy and find our true purpose. And it helps us by placing or communicating with us in many different ways. So these messages can come through dreams. They can come by a book falling off the shelf. You meet someone and they utter exactly what you need to hear at just the right time. For me, it has been coincidences, these clever coincidences put in my path. And what made me write the book, I had no desire to write a book ever, is when I figured out that going back and seeing the coincidences and then how they turned into the miracle. If I hadn't taken action, it would have just been a coincidence. and nothing we would be talking about right now. But every one of those coincidences, I had taken an action. And as a result, whether it was 2 minutes later or a year down the road, I got exactly what I needed at just the right time. And when I figured that out, that taking action, is when I decided to write the book.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if we shared this the last time we spoke, but I found in my life, starting in my mid to late 30s, when a lot of the spiritual pathway for me reopened, is that every time I was presented with something through synchronicity, I had three choices. I could either dismiss it out of hand. I could say, you know, that's interesting, but I'll think about that next year or a few months down the road. Or I could say yes, right now with a capital Y, embrace that and move forward. And I found that every time I said that big yes, the next one would come and the
Yes.
next one would come. Have you found that also?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's like too much. It's like, it's like, oh, I can't believe it. I say thank you. And I say thank you a lot. Please and thank you. Prayer and gratitude, which I consider to be the highest form of prayer. And the more I say thank you, the more I get. And there have been specific times when I have said to God, when I'm overwhelmed with the gift, oh God, it doesn't get better than this. And I can't tell you how many times God says, oh yeah, watch me. And then just immediately, just completely bowls me over, So it's really this intelligence that what you're saying is that what we're describing here is having a personal relationship with this intelligence via consciousness. It's through consciousness, I think anything is possible because it permeates everything. And I find that that I get my main communication is through coincidence. Although I've had 2 dreams for sure that changed the trajectory of where I was going.
And what were those?
Well, the one that solved my problems, my issues, and the other one was really a very, very short, kind of uneventful, short dream. And it was because at the time I was a senior in college and I was getting my degree in art education because that was my mother's thing, right? I bought into her story that if you're a woman and you're artistic, the only thing you can do is teach. So I kind of went with this program, not really happy with it. And so now I'm almost graduating. I need 1 more term and 6 months of being an intern. And I have this dream where the doorbell rings and I go to the door and it's the mailman and he hands me an envelope and I open the envelope and it's my teaching certificate. And I look at it and I go, I don't want to teach. And I threw it in this little plastic bin. And I get up in the morning and I went to the registrar's office and changed my major to, I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist. And there was no archaeology department, so I changed it to art history. And it didn't go over with my parents very well. But and then from there, another synchronicity happened that I was introduced to the writings of Buckminster Fuller and fell in love with him and decided that I was going to be an architect. And so it's because of these things. And it was just like, well, there it is in front of your face. How can I say no to this,
Absolutely. One of the things that I've thought about throughout my life, because I started receiving messages as a kid, and I tried to determine whether these messages were something that was coming from my own thoughts or coming from that source of guidance, the higher source, the divine source, whichever way people can understand that. How do you distinguish between those two lines of communication, between something coming from yourself and something coming from the divine source?
Well, I have, because of my experiences, which you're describing, to me, it's one and the same. We were given an inner voice, an intuition. And the more we listen to the intuition that is within, but the message is, I don't know where the message comes from, but the more I would take action on my intuition and I would receive what I needed, the more I trusted my intuition. And then there were just times when it came from outside of me. There was just no other way. And I can't really answer that because I believe it's one and the same. This consciousness, it speaks to you through your intuition.
One of the things that I've sensed when I've had this is that if I heard a voice shouting at me or demanding that I do something, chances are that was something coming from my own ego. That's what they used to call the still soft voice within, that soft, reassuring, almost loving voice, a parental loving voice, and acted upon it in that, then it was the correct path for me.
Well, the ego is the opposite of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so Holy Spirit wants connection, union, love. Ego wants separation. I'm special, and it separates one from the other, and then somebody just sort of lives in their specialness. But we're all connected. So, have you been able to discern then when it is your ego and when you're being contacted by the Holy Spirit? Do you sense a difference?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, the ego is the shouting voice or the demanding voice. And I actually came to that conclusion in my early 40s. And the voice has been that soft, still voice within since that time. So absolutely.
Yes, I totally agree.
I'll share a quick example. In 1975, I was in the Air Force. I was stationed in Korea. And one morning, I had no reason to be concerned about my mother back in New York, but that voice said, you need to call your mom. She needs to hear from you. She needs some reassurance. And I always responded when I had that counsel and advice, and I called my mother. And in those days, we had for those of us who are of a certain age, we had extension phones. So you had a wired phone in one room and a wired phone in another room. And my sister and my mother picked up the extension simultaneously. And I said, Mom, is there anything wrong? And my sister goes, oh, my God, how did he find out? And it turned out that she was scheduled for major surgery the next day. And the voice told me to reassure her that the surgery would be a complete success. She'd have a full recovery and she would be just fine. And I did that. And it made her feel much, much better. And consequently, everything that the voice said came to pass. So that's an example in my life of one of those wonderful situations where the voice came, gave me wonderful advice that proved to be healing or helpful to someone else. And I really love when that happens because I'm the kind of person who loves to share that type of information. And I think you are too.
Well, yeah, but what you just described was you left something out.
Go
okay,
ahead.
so you got the message, but you listened and you took action.
Absolutely.
It becomes second nature at some point, and I would just love for your listeners to take this away, that this kind of communication happens to a lot of people. The let's say strange thing about my experiences is that all of these experiences that I write about, happened to me. And it's the volume, the number of experiences. But just the other day, I was at the ophthalmologist, and so I told her about my book, And she says, well, I've got a story for you. I said, okay. And she said that she and her husband had to go to a gala. And and she was dead tired. That was the day when she was doing a lot of surgeries. She did not want to go to this gala, but they had to go to the gala. So now they go to the gala, and now she has to take the babysitter home because her husband's rule is never be alone with the babysitter, which I find interesting. And so she said she takes the babysitter home, and she's now driving back. And all of a sudden she said, I heard my grandmother go, wake up. And she goes, I came to, and I was heading into a brick wall. And she was saved. Mm. So, and I hear these stories again and again and again. And so this is a pure instance of, departed loved ones looking after us.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking more about your new book, Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing in the next segment. But I just want to finish talking about the divine language of coincidence. When Carl Jung defined meaningful coincidences without causal connection as synchronicity, that really, learning about that when all of these things were happening to me in my mid to late 30s, it really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. Please give us some examples of some of the most profound that you've experienced.
Okay, there's two little strings of coincidences. Now, as far as a miracle goes, I do not give one miracle. I call it bigger miracle or lesser miracle than the other. But some of them have proved the results. The miracle has proved to be more important. So I have these two little I would say not little miracles, but they had to do with my wedding. And as it was two absolutely amazing coincidences that I write about in the book. And the one was a wrong number. I dial a wrong number, and I get somebody that I know socially by one digit. And, he as a result of this misdial, at the time he owned the Barclay Hotel here in Philadelphia, and he gave us the ballroom for free and threw in the presidential suite for 2 nights. And then the other one was a woman who found my driver's license, got a hold of me, put it through the mail slot. She lived only a couple of blocks away. And then just a couple of months later, calls me up and tells me that she found my ATM card. Now, what are the odds? And so she said, do you want me to put it in your mail slot? No, I recognized that this is bigger than me, okay? And I said, no. I said, you have to come to my studio. We have to meet. And as a result of that meeting, I found out that she was a violinist. And for our wedding, she got her friend who played the classical guitar. And they played for my wedding present. I had to give the friend like $50 or something. But they played Concierto de Aranjuez, one of my favorite pieces of music while I'm walking down the aisle. Mm. So, okay, so those are like amazing little coincidences that provided exactly what I needed at just the right time. And there's 3 coincidences, and I won't go into them, but I had left my husband because he was a rager, and I tried, he tried too, but these are childhood issues that are hard to overcome. And I had decided, that's it, I am never going to lay eyes on this jerk again. 3 coincidences. I had moved out, and in the course of 2 months, 3 coincidences happened. One had to do with opening the Course in Miracles, which it would be my go-to for counseling. and opening the book up to the healed relationship, which I did not want to read, but my rule is you have to read whatever you open the book up to. That allowed me to agree to see him if he called. Basically, what the message was God is in everyone. And if your brother comes to you with his hand outstretched to connect with you and you say no to your brother, you say no to God. Well, what am I to do? But so he called the next day. I agreed to meet with him. He tells me the most amazing coincidence. I'll just tell you, it was about his wedding ring. And the third coincidence, this allowed us to get to talk to each other, and we finally got together. And then I was supposed to go to Maui to be the matron of honor for my best friend yet again. And I had trepidation about having him come with me because he had sabotaged so many romantic getaways. But I thought, no, if he's coming, I'm going to trust. And he came with me. And because of the book I was reading, I took a book that I had started to read, and I was very disappointed that I picked that one because, this was not a beach read. It was the title was Endless Energy by Deborah Green, who's a PhD kinesiologist. And I'm reading this book, and it talks about the healing she does these energy readings. And I'm fascinated. I'm going back and forth to the citations at the end of the book. And then I go back, and there is her name, Deborah Green, Maui, Hawaii. Not only was she in Maui, I mean, we could have been going any of the 360 degrees, but her address is Kihei Road, and that our condo was on Kihei Road. So we ended up having these readings, and it was fascinating. And as a result of I don't know what it was, if it was the trust issue, the healings that she did, that was in 2009. And Frank has not had one single episode since. In fact, he's had a spiritual transformation, and I'm married to my ideal companion.
That is so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
And you can say, well, I mean, was it wonderful to get a free, gorgeous ballroom for my wedding venue? Or to have this wonderful music? It was spectacular. But saving my marriage was, I would say, more important.
Absolutely. My guest is Sophia Demas. We're going to be talking about her new book, Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. Sophia, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you.
My website is sophiademas.com. There's reviews of my books, and also there's my influencers page, which is there are 8 people that I have had personal contact with, and I consider mentors. The book can be purchased at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It can be ordered anywhere.
Wonderful. And we'll be back with more of Sophia after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Sophia Demas. We're talking about her brand new book, Consciousness Beyond Death, true stories of signs, messages, and timing. Sophia, in the introduction to the book, you share that research supports children are born with a natural spiritual compass. Please share these findings and what they mean to our understanding of consciousness.
Okay. So there's been a lot of research on reincarnation. And what researchers have found is that these children, that when they are reported, these are children that are 3, 4, 5 years old that talk about this, their husband, their wife, this other place. And it is as the child grows up and life's distractions come in, that connection is broken. A very close friend had told me that when her daughter was 3 or 4, she said that my name is, and it was like a Hawaiian name, and she said that there were trees with pineapples, and she described this place. And so how can a child, and this is, numerous books have been written about this. So I believe that when children have this natural sort of connection with the home that they've left, because I believe that when we die, we simply shed our bodies and we go where we came from. In fact, that's the way I end the book. I had sort of an out-of-body experience during a guided meditation. And that was the message. I was floating in light, and I thought, oh my God. And I heard like a voice, or it was more like the message. It's what you understand after somebody talks to you. And it said, this is where you came from, and this is where you're going to go. Mm. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And we forget that, our true home is out there being in oneness.
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I had this fascination with the work and life of Edgar Allan Poe. And for me, I thought perhaps I was the reincarnation of Edgar Allan Poe. I never was able to establish that. But the poetic gift definitely came through. So maybe, who knows?
Well, the Poe house, his house is here in Philadelphia.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. Yeah, I've got to visit there sometime.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. In Consciousness Beyond Death, you offer several accounts, some personal and those from others, sharing experiences before and after the transition of loved ones. One particularly moving story was your unlikely and synchronistic trip to Lilydale. Would you share that with our listeners, please?
Yes, that I would consider that a wild experience. So we were going to Buffalo for my friend's daughter's wedding. And then from then on, we were going to go to Maine, where my friend and neighbor owns an island there. They have their own personal island off the coast of Maine in Machiasport. So I was working on some project, and so I tasked Frank to find us a place in Buffalo. So it turns out that everything was taken because there was a Beyonce concert, and then there was the state fair. So all the hotel rooms were taken, but he managed to find this very modest little Airbnb. So he says, look what I found. I booked us for 2 nights. And I'm like, why? Why 2 nights in Buffalo? And he says, well, there's Lake Ontario or whatever lake. And I said, I'm going to, spend a day looking at a lake. I mean, this is eating into our, Maine vacation. And he said, oh, it'll be just, an sort of R&R. And he said, I think you're going to find the hosts interesting. I said, well, what's so interesting about them? And he said, well, the husband has been in broadcast forever, and now he's writing a book about it. And his wife is a Reiki master, and she offered actually to do a meditation. And I said, oh, okay, we can use a meditation. So I went along with this. So we wake up in the morning for our meditation. And she says, well, I have to leave by 10 because I have a book signing in Lilydale. And I go, oh, I said, a book signing? And I just looked at Frank, and he got it. We're going to the book signing in Lilydale. So I said, what's Lilydale? And she said, well, it's a gated community. And then she changed it and said, oh, it is a spiritual community. So we go to Lilydale, and it just struck me like it was like a collection of these little Victorian houses, and just perfectly manicured lawns, and these people kind of walking around like with these like smiles on their faces, and it's not making sense to me. But anyway, we go to the bookstore, and there is our hostess signing books, and she introduces me to the manager, and tells her that I'm writing a book on coincidences. And she says, well, that's right up our alley. You should come, and when you finish the book, we'll give you a reading. So I thought, well, that's why this whole thing happened, that Frank had this wild idea to spend 2 nights here. So the manager goes, oh, it's Sunday today. And so we have, there's, what did she call them? Message ceremonies. We have 2 message ceremonies on Sundays, one at 2 and one at 7. And I said, well, what's a message ceremony? She said, well, these mediums. And what Lilydale is, it's a seasonal. I believe it's May through August, and all these mediums collect there, and people go to contact their departed loved ones. So she says, these are mediums, and they give messages to people. I said, you're kidding. That's fantastic. So Frank and I have this lovely lunch on this Victorian porch, and off we go to the assembly hall. So there's about, 150 people there. And so I said, Frank, I want to be in the back so that I could watch the show. So I'm listening to this, and the way it went is each medium would give out 2 messages, and she would call on this person, and say, you with the green shirt, will you receive? And the person would go, yes, because that's why they're there. And then she would start out by saying, or he would start out by saying, well, there's this man in overalls, and he tinkers with cars, but he is very loved by the family, and he's special to you. Oh, yes, that's my Uncle Roy. Or maybe a couple of times. I think there was at least 2 times when the person said, no, that doesn't sound like anyone I know. So I'm having a blast. Like, this is this like free show. And then towards the end, this medium points towards me and says, you with the white hair and glasses. Well, half the people in the room had white hair and glasses. And because I'm looking, and then she says, you with a pink headband. And I said, me? Yes. Will you receive? So I said, absolutely. I said, I'm an open book. So she starts out by saying, there's 2 men. One is your grandfather, and the other one is your father, but it's your father who wants to give you the message. And how she described him was, he's short and stocky. And then she changed it. He says, no, he's short and solid. Well, that was the hook, because he was sinewy, all muscle till he died when he was 92. And my father was absolutely hysterically funny. And then we would have these fights, and then, and then we would make up, and then he would, go tell his friends, how awful he was when he was mad at me. And I found out from one of his friends, and that just never sat well with me. So he says, the message is, and he said, your father says that he had said some inappropriate things, and he just wants you to know that he's full of love for you. Well, Victor, it was instant healing. It was just, it just made me whole. It was just amazing. And then he says, and he has a message for your nephew. And I have two nephews, one I'm particularly close to. And he says, your father doesn't want him to find himself on the other side and be sorry for what he did. And I realized that it was my other nephew who had addiction problems. So as soon as we were on our way to Maine, I texted him and I said, Nick, I said, this is really weird. And I decided to go along with how the mediums presented their presentations. So I texted and said, I got a weird message from your papu, which is a grandfather in Greek, and but I don't want to text it. So if this is okay with you, please contact me. So immediately he goes, 7:00 your time. So when we got to the island, I called him, and he tells me that his addiction had come back, and his wife had just left and taken the 3 children to down to LA to her parents, and that he said he was sitting there with a gun. And I said, does this make sense to you? And he goes, oh yeah. And he tells me the story that he was sitting there with a gun, and since then he's turned his life around.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
It was unbelievable. These two messages that were absolutely apropos.
I've had the blessing, and I'm grateful for the blessing of seeing departed loved ones in spirit or feeling their presence in spirit. I've come to learn that many experience the presence, sometimes in the form of touch or physical manifestation, of loved ones who have transitioned. Do you have a couple you can share with us?
I have one that when, so I have a number of these communications that had to do, the first chapters, the events had to do with my father, and the second chapter, they had to do with my mother. One time, I woke up in the morning and I felt her next to me. I felt her. She was there next to me. Now, a lot of people have reported seeing apparitions of their departed loved ones. My departed friends and family know better than to appear, because that would freak me out. So the messages have come in other ways. But this was, my mother was laying in bed next to me, and I didn't look. I just was in awe. And then all of a sudden she said in Greek, oh, I've got to go. And she disappeared. And I know I was not asleep. I was absolutely awake. So I have heard of this, of the touch, of presence. I've also, this one time, I'd like to share this. I this is when I was starting my second career after architecture. I had a dress designing business, and I was designing this. It was interesting because the 7 wedding gowns that I did, all 7 brides had lost their mothers. And so I had become kind of a sort of a surrogate, a confidant. And so this one, actually, it was because of her that I even decided to go into this business. So I hadn't started the business yet, so I was sewing the gown in my living room. It was in a dream. I'm sewing this young woman's wedding gown, and I felt someone just on the back of my right shoulder. And I turned around, and she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. She says, "I just wanted to look at the dress." So I became friendly with this woman, and she invited Frank and I to their home. And I look on the mantle, and there is this photograph of this woman who appeared in my dream, and it was her mother. And these things happen just more than we know.
Absolutely.
As long as we're open to them. I mean, we have to be open.
Absolutely. I shared with you personally, and some listeners know of my relationship with my former partner, Judy, who passed in 1998. And after her funeral, I came home and I was exhausted and obviously grieving. And I needed to rest. And I laid down on the bed, face down. And the 2 cats that we had at the time jumped up on the bed and sat in front of me like 2 little sphinxes. And they were just looking at me lovingly. And then all of a sudden, their gaze turned up toward the roof. And very slowly, they started coming down and coming down and coming down until they were looking directly at my back. And I felt 2 hands touching my back, gently massaging and rubbing me. And I knew it was her saying, "I love you. I'm fine. Everything is going to be okay."
Oh, how lucky for you. How lucky.
Yeah.
On that note, I am going to share one of the stories that had to do with my mother, which my nephew, John, who told me this, he told me this maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And I just cannot believe that he has never told me this story. But his oldest son, Teddy, when he told me that when he was feeding him, when he was 1.5, he was in the high chair. And he's trying to feed him and doing the little airplane, circling the spoon, and he's, feeding him. And then all of a sudden, he said, Teddy's eyes just went like silver dollars, just wide-eyed. And he said, and he's looking past my shoulder, and all of a sudden he starts giggling. And he said, I said, Teddy, what are you seeing? And he goes, yeah, which is the Greek word for grandmother. And generally, kids who don't speak Greek and have Greek grandmothers generally call them yayas, but he distinctly called her yaya, and it was absolutely no question. So this was what you're describing is as real as it comes, and how wonderful that we've had these experiences.
Absolutely. My guest is Sophia Demas. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Sophia Demas. We're talking about her new book, Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. You share many moving stories, and in particular, the story of a woman named Joy. The story suggests that when open, we're presented with opportunities to be angels of healing and completion, helping others prepare for transition. How do we recognize these callings and avail ourselves to those in that special need?
I'll tell you, Victor, none of these events or these reaching out to help somebody, none of them were deliberated. Like, I never sat there going, okay, here's the plus column and here's the negative column. Should I do this? It was just, with Joy, when I heard that she had this seizure and was unconscious in the hospital, and was told that she had no living relative, that she was all alone. She was a couple of years younger than I was, and come to find out that she had MS. It was like, and also I found out from a neighbor that she was in a hospital that was 4 blocks away. I never thought of it. I just put on my coat and went to the hospital. And then from then I got involved in taking care of her and sort of amassing a team. And then her demise at the end just completely floored the neurologists. And I share in the book that there were 3 of us that took care of her. Each one of us had a different task, and I was her day to day, taking her to the doctor, making sure she was drinking water and things like that. And the MS had kind of there was this sort of missing link in her thought in trying to talk. So one of the people on the team, Miriam, calls me up and says, I just had this meditation with my mother that I want to share with you, but I can't do it over the phone. It's just too amazing. Can I come over? I'm like, of course. And her mother, it was with her mother that I had the guided meditation that I write about at the end of the book. All I knew is that she channeled. And so during their meditation, her mother, Miriam, had not told her about Joy, that she had come on board to help. And she was a lawyer, so she was doing the legal assignments. So she comes over and she said, right in the middle of meditation, her mother actually mentions Joy's name and says, Joy is not to be perceived by the senses. And this is very important because Joy was a major hoarder, and you could hardly, be in her room with the urine smells and everything. It was just like things piled, stuff on the floor. And she said, Joy is not to be perceived by the senses. In a past life, she was in a position of supreme power and abused it, and has chosen to come back and suffer and atone. So the strangest things would happen with her. At one point, I coincidentally, I was having coffee with one of my mentors, Father Stephen, and he's just the closest thing to Jesus Christ here on earth, and he would open these covenant houses, which were shelters for homeless youth. So we're having coffee, and I said, you know what? Why don't we go over to Joy? I want you to meet her, and you can see what the work I do. And it just so happened that it was February. It was 8 degrees out, and we go to her apartment. I called. She did answer the phone, and I could tell something was happening. I said, we're going now. We're not having our coffee first. And we found her on all fours, shivering, no heat. She was out of it, but the phone, she was near her. And I called the ambulance, and the doctor said that day that had she not come when she came, she would have been dead by the afternoon from dehydration and inflammation. And it was just, so somehow I saved her life. And at the end, she had the last seizure she had. The neurologist called all three of us to come and sign off, because in the MRI, she was now a vegetable. And he said, there's nothing, we can do. And I said, but I just found this great assisted facility, because, she loves Center City, and she could sit on her wheelchair and look out the window. And he just looked at me pitifully and said, she will never be able to sit in a wheelchair. So we said, okay. And they were not going to feed her. They were just not going to feed her. The next morning, the intern who was present called me and said, we have no explanation about this, but the nurse came in and asked Joy her name. Joy said her name and her birthday. And so we can't explain it, but we have to continue feeding her. Well, she, against any doctor's prognosis, she kept getting better and better. And Tracy, the other person on our team, and I went to visit her. And she was, so we went to visit her, and she could talk. And I said to her, yes. And so they decided to take her to physical therapy. So Tracy and I visit her at physical therapy, and I go into the room first. Tracy was on the phone, and I said, you have been doing so well, Joy. I have this place for you that you will love, because there's restaurants and you can look out the window. And she looks at me and says, thank you. I appreciate you very much. She had never thanked me for anything in all the 6 years that I took care of her. And I am it was like a completely different person. And then Tracy goes in, and she comes out and she goes, you won't believe this. She looks at me and goes, Tracy, I love you. Mm. And we left in a complete, daze. So that was on a Wednesday. That Friday, I was just outside the physical therapy, and I thought, I'll just go in and say hello. And I go into her room, and she is physically dying. She's dying, actively dying. And I kissed her, and I said goodbye to her. And I said to God, look, I know you did a deal, she was going to come back to suffer and atone. As a human, I've seen her suffer. I said, take her. And she died that afternoon. And I am convinced, without a doubt, that the deal that she made, that she was going to suffer and atone, and God would allow that to happen until she could express love and gratitude, which she did in the same day. I'm absolutely convinced of this.
What would you like readers to take away from Consciousness Beyond Death?
Hope that it is just without any trace of doubt, I'm saying this, that when we die, we simply shed our bodies and we are as conscious as you and I and everyone who's listening is at this very moment. It is without a doubt. And then when we make our transition and think about it, then we will be able to cleverly communicate with our loved ones that we've left behind. That, I think, is what I hope people take from the book.
My guest is Sophia Demas. Her wonderful new book, Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. Sophia, one more time, please tell our listeners how they can get your books and find out more about you.
The book is available on Amazon and can be ordered wherever books are sold. And they can also go on my website to learn more at sophiademas.com.
Sophia, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this very, very important, hopeful, and wonderful message.
Oh, thank you, Victor. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.